Hi, I'm Peter Phillips. I'm a professor of economics. I'm a labor economist. I'm chair of the economics department at the University of Utah. In the summertime, I'm a backcountry patrol ranger at the Lee Lake Patrol Cabin in the Grand Tetons National Park. What you see in front of you is the Grand Teton Range, and this is Lee Lake, and this is part of the territory that I patrol in the summer. And here I am with one of my buddies, a long-time Teton Ranger, Old John Carr, and you see behind us the spring floods that are take Cottonwood Creek over its banks and flood the Lupin Meadow Ranger area. And this is my wife, who works in the backcountry with me. Her name's Jean Reagan, and she's a famous mule skinner in the Tetons. Not. And this is our cabin. It was built in 1929, the first year of the park, and it is located at the north end of Lee Lake, and we have a outhouse back along this trail in the woods, and we filter our water with this gravity filter, and these are bear bars to keep the critters out at night. We're so far back in the woods that Penny, the moose postmistress, has to walk 4 miles to bring us a letter. I am also the proud father of Jane Phillips, who you see here, and I am so delighted to announce that she has graduated and is now a Bachelor of Arts and from Pitzer College, and she's now going to get a little more math and a little more biology before she goes on to graduate school. Now in the winter time, I'm an entirely different persona. I am a labor economist, and the labor market is my passion. And the reason the labor market is my passion is because the labor market as an institution is the main way that most of us, including myself, make a living. And unfortunately, lately, that hasn't been going all that well. I'm interested in economic history, particularly labor market history, and this is a famous picture by Dorothea Lange from the Great Depression. The Great Depression in the early 1930s, unemployment rates rose as high as 25%. Today we are experiencing the worst labor market since the Great Depression, but it is only approximately half as bad as the Great Depression. But for this individual and anybody who's been hit by labor market woes, it's a personal depression that should be taken very seriously. Over 8 million jobs have been lost in the last 3 years. Unemployment has just fallen to 9.4%, but as opposed to the 9.7% that I put on this slide. But that fall in the unemployment rate isn't really the good news it sounds like it is, because the reason the unemployment rate went down is partly because there have been some new jobs created, but mostly because a lot of people have given up looking for work. Here is a graph that I find extraordinarily telling. What this graph is, if you look at this line here, this line is 0, and it is the benchmark line for this graph. And what it shows is right here, if we start right at this point, this is the beginning of the last several recessions since World War II. And as each recession began, unemployment began to shrink. It began to fall by 1% or 2% or 3%. And if you follow this red line, you'll see how employment has fallen in the last recession by following this red line like this. And our last recession in 2002 is this brown line falling thus. And each of these lines falling is how fast and how far employment fell at the beginning and into the bottom of each of the last recessions. And you can see there's two patterns. There's a lot of recessions that were sort of V-shaped, where unemployment fell and then it employment fell, and then employment rose. It fell rapidly and it rose rapidly. In the previous recession to this one, and also in the 1991 recession, employment fell slowly, but it recovered very slowly. And today we have the worst of all worlds, because employment has fallen rapidly and sharply, but it is recovering slowly. So now we are facing not only the deepest recession in the post-World War period, but probably the longest time before there's a complete recovery back up to this zero line, which means getting back to the employment level we were at when it started. Down here at the bottom are months until recovery, and as you can see, we're already 3 years into it, 36 months, and it's clear we have at least a year and probably several years to go before we get back to where we were in 2007. Here's a graph that portrays some of the details of what's been happening in the labor market. The red line is the unemployment rate, and each of these blue shaded areas is a recession going back to 1960. And as you can see, in the early 1980s there was very high unemployment associated with the recession then. Our unemployment rate has not risen quite as high as it did during the 1982 recession, but it is the second worst unemployment rate in the post-World War II period. The question is, how long will this unemployment rate be high? As you can see, in 1982 it fell sharply, but as you can see now, it is not falling sharply. The recession of 2007 to now is a recession that has been felt differently across the country. Here is North and South Dakota, and these are the unemployment rates that they are experiencing today, and this is the range of unemployment rates that they have experienced historically. And these two states, which are agricultural states, certainly not states that experienced the housing bubble, have been the least impacted by the current recession. At the other extreme, here is Nevada. Nevada's unemployment rate is really at a level that is comparable to many of the years of the Great Depression, and in terms of the historical experience in the post-war period of unemployment in Nevada, it's ranged from a low of 4% to a high of 14%, and the worst unemployment rate that Nevada has experienced is its current unemployment rate. There are some signs of recovery. These reflect the drop in payroll jobs from early 2008 to late 2009, and now payroll jobs are beginning to grow, but the growth rate is a lot lower than the shrinkage rate was. And these people here who lost their jobs in the beginning of 2009 are about to lose their 99 weeks of unemployment insurance coverage, and they're going to be in the labor market but with no unemployment insurance benefits. This is a big long period going back to 1980. It's showing the annual growth rate in our economy. As you can see, if you look at it, the average annual growth rate has been a little bit above 3%. And each of these blue areas are recessions. And one of the things you can see is after the recessions, typically the growth rate is strong, although it was not strong after the 1991, not as strong after 2001, and pretty weak today. A lot of people think, and a lot of times when I talk, it sounds like labor economics and an analysis of the labor market is all about numbers. But behind those numbers are people, and ultimately what labor economics is about is the people in the labor market, and it is my concern and care for them that gives me a passion for this subject.